Everyone says how horrible it will be to renovate or build your house. We're here to say it doesn't have to be that way. Join 3 seasoned architects as they interview homeowners who recently completed a large project and ask them one simple question. What do you know now that you wish you knew before you started? Welcome to Home, the Second Story podcast.
Hi, and welcome to Home, the Second Story. We are 3 residential architects sharing real conversations with homeowners who've taken on custom home or renovation projects. If you haven't already, check out our first episode to hear more about us and why we're doing this. I'm Taylor Davis from TPD Architect in Birmingham, Alabama, and I am joined today by my co-hosts.
I am Sherry Scott of Springhouse Architects in Cincinnati, Ohio.
And I'm Marilyn Modinger of Runcible Studios in Lancaster, Pennsylvania and Boston, Massachusetts. Today, we are joined by Alex and Ximena from Boston, Massachusetts. Welcome, guys.
Thank you. Hi. Happy to be here.
So I'm going to handle the first 5 with the just quick orientation questions. Where is your project located?
In Jamaica Plain neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts.
Okay. And was this project a new build, an addition, or a renovation?
It was a renovation.
When did you start your project and when did you move in?
So I had to go back to my emails to kind of get the timeline straight. We started design work in June 2020 when we first moved into the house. And that lasted almost an entire year. The demo phase of the renovation didn't start until June of 2021.
Okay.
And then we moved back into the house in April of 2022.
So this was a new house to you and you hadn't lived there before?
Correct. We bought the house after COVID happened. We were living in a small apartment in Back Bay, and we both are meeting heavy people with work, and that didn't work out for us in the work from home world. So we immediately had to pivot and find a house to live in, and so we found this one that was basically just move-in ready, but definitely needed some work. The house was built in 1885, and so it's had a number of renovations. The last renovation was just a kitchen about 7 years before we bought the house.
And what's the size or style of the renovation? Did you do the entire house? Did you add on? How did you handle that?
So the house is a Victorian. It was built in 1885. We didn't do everything, right? We were surgical in our approach. So some rooms were untouched from the renovation itself. We did do an addition, a small addition to expand the mudroom and be able to move a half bath from the kitchen area to the mudroom space.
Oh, nice.
And then, we did some work to the guts of the house in the sense of replacing the full electrical system. And even in the rooms that we didn't touch, we did replace all the wires and switches and outlets.
There are a lot of different ways you can work with an architect. We know that you did work with Marilyn Modinger. And when you worked with her, did you work doing full services? And did she work with you during construction?
Yes, we hired Marilyn. She helped us out through the entire process from concept all the way through construction end.
I'll just add that Ximena took a very large role in the interior design. So we got to work really closely on especially the furniture selections that she was heading up and lighting and things like that. So we don't often get a chance to really work that closely on the full interiors. So we usually do a full interior design, but not all the furniture. So that was a unique part of this project as well. So I want to give Ximena her credit on that. That was a big part of the project.
Nice.
I mean, you were very supportive throughout that time. And in another life, I'm an interior designer, not in this one currently, but it was a really fun time to be able to do this with Marilyn.
Well, and you had such a strong vision of so many, not being afraid of color, not, wanting to use your art collection as inspiration. Why don't we start there? Let's talk about some of those early inspirations for the design and what you were hoping to get out of the space, both aesthetically and functionally.
What's you?
Do you want to talk about the function? Your functionality. I'm more aesthetics. Start with the kitchen. Maybe start with the kitchen.
Functionally, there's a few things that we want to do with the house, and the theme that we set up was, we really wanted this house to be an ideal space for a starting family because we were a starting family. Ximena became pregnant with our first child halfway through the design phase. So we had to pivot on a lot of stuff. So really, it was all about having a spacious kitchen that could function for a family of 3 to 4 with a casual eat-in space. Jimena and I like to host dinner parties, so we still wanted our formal dining space adjacent to the kitchen. And we really wanted to convert the primary bedroom into a suite with an adjoining closet and bathroom. So those were like the main requirements. And then from there, we thought a lot about the mudroom and making sure there's enough space for 4 people to take off their dirty boots and hang up their jackets. And one thing I hated about the house when we first bought it is that it had a half bath right in the middle of the kitchen, like literally.
Literally in the middle.
Why did people do that? We see that all the time.
We wanted to move that out of the kitchen, but there wasn't a lot of choices where to put on the first floor. We went through a lot of iterations of that. Ideally, I would have put it under the stairs, but Marilyn told me, well, we'd have to knock down the whole stairs and that would cost this much money. And we went, no. So we ended up with an addition to expand the mudroom, and that allowed us to move the half bath there, which made a lot of sense because if you're outside barbecuing or running around the backyard, someone needs to use a bathroom. They don't need to run through the full house to get to it. The bathroom's right there near the front door. So that's kind of the way we thought about the function of the house. It's kids running around, making sure that the dirt stays in the mudroom, and there's both casual and spaces for guests to hang out.
Okay, aesthetics. I'm not afraid of colors, so I knew that having lived in rentals before, I'd never been able to paint my own apartments in the past. I knew that this was like the perfect chance for us to try and be a little out there. So on the first floor, almost every room is a different color. I played with wallpaper in the bathroom, and I think I found that wallpaper even before we started the renovation, and it was.
I think I remember that. Yeah. You're
I
like
think
this one.
Yeah, I think it was like hooked in it. So a lot of the colors kind of started from that. Like it's like a blue wallpaper with a really cool pattern, and I had this art piece that my grandma had given me from Peru that matched that blue perfectly. So it was like, okay, this is what's going to be in that room, and I feel like every room kind of evolved from like an art piece that we were putting in that room. So we have this big gold burnt piece by, I can't remember the name, Marilyn, you probably know who I'm talking about. The piece that's in our pink room.
Yes.
We had this big piece that we had gotten as a wedding present. And in the past, it used to be in our bedroom, but now we were like, now we have like the perfect wall for this. So it's going to go here. And then, the framing of that, it's like a nice gold. So gold details went into that room, like the lighting and some of the cabinets that we got for that room as well. So I think it was just like little pieces that were like, oh, like let's add this to this room, let's add this to that. And our living room, it's blue. So we basically have a pink room right next to it, a blue room, and then there's like a turquoise room next to it. So it's a little out there. But I also got inspiration from seeing pictures of this hotel in New Orleans called the Chloe. And I saw they had, so the outside of our house, it's exterior, it's painted the exact same colors as of the Chloe. And I got the exact colors from the interior designer. I think her name is Sarah Ruffello. And I messaged her on Instagram and she gave me the exact colors she used. So I had been struggling with the colors for the exterior for a while. And I just decided to message her, and she gave me the exact numbers. So that worked out really well. And then in the interior of the hotel, they also show 2 adjacent rooms that are blue and pink. So I went with that as well for the house. So she was incredible inspiration for the house.
How do you feel about all those selections now that you're living in it?
I'm obsessed.
Yeah, good.
I mean, it's crazy that this, it's been what, 3 years, almost 3 years now since we moved back into the house. And I feel like there's still so much to do. Like, I'm like, oh, we need more art here, or we haven't put this up, or we need new furniture. But I love the colors of our house. And I feel like every time I go somewhere and I see like, white walls. And no offense to any of you, because I see white walls in the background.
Oh, there's white walls.
It's
But I'm like happy with our decision, and I feel like I live in a home that brings me a lot of joy, like every time I walk in.
That's what it's all about. Well, let's talk about the design process a little bit, because, Alex, you mentioned that it took us a year. I remember why it took us a year. Do you remember? Can you help tell the story of our audience, to our audience, why it took a while?
Sure. So it kind of started with your advice, right? We started talking
Uh-oh.
before we bought the house, and we knew we wanted to do something. We were been in the housing market in Boston for a while and never found anything that we truly liked. Houses here before COVID either needed a ton of work, and we hadn't yet done the research to determine the renovations feasible, or they were flipped by a developer, and not every flip looks great. Like we saw a lot that there was evidence the developer ran out of money at the trim stage because like everything's kind of just hastily put together. And so we never really found something we really wanted to do. And my brother renovated his house in Miami. We had two friends of ours in our network that renovated their house and they were all happy with it. So it was at that point where I started looking at the possibility of renovating a house rather than buying something that was already in the market as is. And the two friends of ours that did renovations with Marilyn. So they highly recommended her. So we reached out and we started chatting. And Marilyn's first advice was, why don't you find a house, move into it, figure out what it needs. And, we can talk next year once you've figured it all out. Well, we found this house, we bought it, closed, moved in. And within 2 weeks, we called Marilyn. I know exactly what I want to do. And, the house is a 3-story house, about 2,700 square feet. The third story is really converted attic space. So it's not quite tall, it's kind of short. And it was dingy and dark. And we really wanted to focus on doing something there. And we wanted that bedroom suite. So the first plan was to turn the entire third floor into a bedroom suite. So there'll be stairs going up. It'll be our private residence. And the theme would be, as you go up the house, the spaces get more and more private, right? The first floor is a common space where people come in and hang out. Second floor, like bedrooms for the kids, maybe a playroom. Third floor is like our bedroom. And then we went through the bid process, and the bids came back and they were heavy. Like it was way out of budget. So we had to scrap that plan and do plan B, which was basically keeping the primary bedroom on the second floor and turning the bedroom adjacent to it into our closet and bathroom for the bedroom. Because we had that bathroom, we decided to take the bathroom that was already existing on the second floor. It was a bathroom that was jammed into the second floor foyer area and remove it. And then we just remodeled the bathroom on the second floor for the guest bathroom on the second floor. And then we did the other work I mentioned previously on the first floor. So that's really why the process took so long, is we went through 2 complete plans before we settled on the one that worked.
How did it feel when those bids came back and they were out of budget? How did that moment feel?
A little discouraging. Throughout the whole process, there's all sorts of speed bumps. That was a speed bump, and a speed bump makes you question, should we even do this? But I was quite clear about what my budget constraints were. I was transparent about that to Marilyn. The budget constraint also included, I wanted to include headroom because if you're going all in on the bid itself, you're going to have a bad time. Marilyn took that input. We started talking about ideas, and that's how we settled on plan B. And, when the bids came back, they came back right in line where I expected them to be, knowing full well that wasn't going to be the final cost of the project. But it was within that threshold of we can proceed to the next step.
So I think you've touched on something really important, which is that a project like this may not be a straight line. You're going to start somewhere. You may end up someplace and totally different than where you initially thought. How did, and I'm gonna poke you about Marilyn a little bit because I know the answer is going to be a good one, but I think it's important information to get out to people who might be listening. How did you rely on your architect in that process? Because when you get something back and you're like, hold the phone, like this isn't what we thought it was going to be. How did y'all work together to sort of reset expectations, reset the design process? How did that process look from the moment you hit that speed bump until the time you got something back that was more in line with what you wanted to invest?
There was an initial cooling off period, right? I remember
I love that.
I remember
Yes.
telling Marilyn, this isn't going to work. I need a few days. So, we didn't
Fair.
talk for a few days.
Yeah, it's fair.
And I wasn't like steaming or anything. My brain goes, and now I want to start thinking of what the next steps are. There's a little bit of doubt where, did I go in too deep? Is there a way out? So then once Marilyn and I reconvened, as I said, I was very transparent about where we were and where I wanted to be. And we started brainstorming and we just started throwing ideas at each other. And, we worked at that point. One of the things that we did is, even though that first bid process didn't pan out in the sense that the bids came in a little too heavy, it was still, I had enough data to choose the builder. So at that point, we went in with the builder we went in with. And so the builder became part of the process of whittling down.
Huge, crucial.
Oh my gosh, like amen all over the place. Like that's such a huge piece of the puzzle, I think, is from what we see a lot, is getting that information back, even if it's not ultimately the information you're going to use in terms of pricing, getting that pricing information back and having a trusted partner in that just pricing process, even
Right.
as you're moving through to get to the point where you want to be, is really critical. I think that's like another team member that can provide really valuable information.
Absolutely. And one of the ways I looked at it was that, the builder's interested in making money, right? It's a business for them. So they don't want to lose an opportunity. And so if I was clear where my lines were, and I told them, if you go over this, I can't pay you. So everybody had a vested interest in meeting the requirements. And so we all worked together and it became a joint process.
Yeah, I'm really glad that that you brought that part up, because I think it's really crucial, and I think it's good for our listeners to hear that, as this isn't a straight line. It's okay if there's iteration. You're getting good information, and it's going to make the project better in the end.
Absolutely.
Even though, as you're describing, those speed bumps are not the most fun moments. What I'd like to hear a little bit more about, our big question that we ask everyone here is, knowing what you know now today, having lived in the house for a little bit, what would you do differently? What would you advise someone to do?
So, I kind of already hinted at it, right?
Mhm.
It's be transparent, be very clear with what you want. If there's one piece, if I can abstract it a little bit, it's specify everything. One thing I learned, if you don't specify a particular desire, the builder and the contractors and the carpenters are going to do whatever is easiest for them. And not in a bad way. It's just, you didn't give them directions. So they're going to go with the point of least resistance. A quick example is one of the things that didn't even occur to me to specify early on, that I didn't notice until after we moved in, was that every light switch had a huge range of distance from its adjoining corner or doorpost to where it is. Some are 2 inches away, some are 12 inches away. Not a big deal, but in my head, once I saw it, I was like, why didn't they put it all approximately the same distance away from the door? And I realized it's wherever the studs were. They just went to where the studs were, and that was it. If I had said, oh, I want every light switch to be between 4 to 6 inches from the doorpost, they would have gladly done it. I'm sure that it wouldn't have been a big deal. But there was several points in the process, in the meetings, where they're asking what I want, where I was hesitant. I didn't want to come off as a demanding customer. I didn't want to come off as, being too persnickety. But in hindsight, I should have been, because everybody just wants to make everyone else happy. So, that's one thing I encourage others to do is say everything you want. No details too small to explicitly state as a requirement.
Here. Yeah, I agree with that. Ximena, do you have any thoughts on this question, knowing what you know now? Anything you would do differently or change?
I know we talked about the budget and budget being a constraint, but maybe one of the downfalls or moving to a bigger house is that you end up accumulating more things. And and I feel like our kitchen could be a little bit bigger now, like just based on how much stuff has come in after we moved in too. And now with like a second kid, like our island fits 3 chairs perfectly, and now I'm like, oh crap, we're gonna have a fourth. Like, where's she gonna go? Like, one of us is gonna be eating standing up. and our dining room is a bit more formal. It's not something that we typically use during the week. So that just like, I just think about our kitchen a lot now, and I'm like, oh, I wish we had like just moved it a little bit more towards the patio. And like, I see like posts of like dog beds being like under cabinets, and I'm like, oh, that would have been really cool if our dog could sleep under our island, and thought of that when we were designing the space. But overall, like I love our house, and I think it's like, if anything, we're the ones that need to get rid of some of our stuff, not the other way around.
I hear that. And I also just want to underline that it's hard to know, when you're designing something, your own house, you're going through that whole process, you're thinking about everything about how you used to live, how you want to live, how you might live with one kid, how you might live in the future with two kids way on the horizon. You are trying to plan for so many different things that there's a lot there. And obviously, I, as the architect, am helping you through those questions. But even so, it's hard to imagine all that stuff and hard to kind of know how to build a house that grows with you. So, so I'm glad it sounds like we did okay, but
Yeah.
also taking those lessons forward to whatever the next house is, or to the renovation that might happen down the line, is important, so that you can continue to evolve and take those notes for future.
And look, overall, we're quite fortunate. We're very happy with the renovation. There's always a handful of things that you might have done differently, but there's no major regrets. There's nothing I look at and go, ah. It's mostly minor stuff that would have been like, oh, if I would have known just to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same in my own renovation. There are things where I'm like, oh man, like, why didn't I think of that? So it's everybody. Let's talk about construction for a minute. You mentioned the builder, and before we went live, you were mentioning that the builder has been back to do other little things for you. So that relationship was obviously a good one. So tell us a little bit about how construction went. Our weekly meetings, anything like that that you might want to share that comes to mind.
It was all new for me, and the whole process. Man, if you remember, I was like a little kid, just
Yeah, I
kind of
remember.
absorbing everything. I wanted to learn as much as I could, and so the first phase of the construction was probably the most nerve-wracking for me. Demo, having an old house, we weren't sure what's behind the wall. So I had some headroom in the budget, but like I've heard from friends that encountered problems they weren't expecting, and that can really be a big impact on your project. So we got really lucky. I think the first memory I have is the builder telling us we're out of it, and so that means demo was all done. There was one piece of wood sill that needed replacing, so that wasn't a terribly huge expense. We didn't find any lead in unexpected places. So demo went through, and for that point, I remember relaxing a bit because, at this point, we're not going to find any major surprises. And so construction became more of a positive experience, right? Every week we're going to be having the meeting, we're seeing progress. Yeah, there's little problems here and there. We have to put our heads together to think it, but I'm a problem solver. That's what I like to do. So it was good to be part of that process. It was excellent having Marilyn there because, being new to renovations, had she not been there, I wouldn't have, I think one of the biggest helps she provided during construction was as the builder encountered a problem, she would huddle with the builder, figure out the options, maybe argue a little bit, then come to me and say, all right, here's option A, option B, option C, and I recommend B. And then we could talk about it. And that's how we solved each problem as it came along. So that whole process became a lot easier because she was involved. And the other consequence of, and I go back to this because other friends have asked me, what my advice is. And I always say, have headroom in your budget because we made so many decisions during construction because you get inspired. You start realizing there's a gaping hole in the wall here. What do you want to do here? Let's put a linen closet in there.
Yes.
Another pivot we made is I realized that the mudroom closet was going to be humongous. And I thought, can we put a broom closet here? Because we didn't think about putting broom somewhere. So we just added a broom closet. So we had this opportunity to add to the scope of the project during construction. And almost every one of those opportunities was a net positive.
The pocket doors, that was huge. That was like
We added
the
Pocket doors. That was like a late breaking. That was a great idea.
For the listeners, our first floor has a large living room that's basically separated into, it's like a front area and a back area, because that's the way houses were built in the 1800s. And then each has a doorway to a space adjacent to each one. There's a front foyer area with the front door, and then the dining room. And so we added pocket doors there. And one of our motivations for the pocket door was that as our family grew, my parents come visit, we could turn the living room into a bedroom and have some privacy. We also plan on hosting people, and it could control the flow of people through the room. The pocket doors have been so useful, and we would, it's not one of those things where you ask for it at the time. We're kind of just walking through, and what else can we do here? Let's put pocket doors here. So it was good to have those opportunities. So overall, I look back on the construction time and overall positive experience. And a little bit of that's luck in the sense that somebody else dealt with some of the hardships of the house at some previous time. But a lot of it had to do with the team.
And your advice to have headroom in your budget made that be a positive experience instead of every single meeting trying to figure out where you could save. That's great advice, because it really opens up those opportunities to the things that you do see, because, we draw things on paper and we know in our mind what it's going to look like. But even as architects, we walk into a space sometimes and we're like, oh, it would be amazing right here. And to have that opportunity.
Let's open up this ceiling, like all those sorts of things.
Yeah. I think that's great.
Well, and also the peace of mind. I mean, you guys were juggling a lot. You're living in a rented house. I remember coming over there for like design meetings. Ximena, you're pregnant all of a sudden, like in the middle of everything. Like, when's the baby coming in the middle of construction? Like, there's a lot going on. Plus, you guys have jobs and responsibilities and that, all that kind of stuff. So taking that off the table is something that you have to worry about. I hear a lot of feedback when I ask for a budget that sometimes people say, well, no, I don't want to tell you a budget because then you'll spend it all. And I'm like, well, yeah, I'm going to spend the number you tell me. So if you want to spend $50, tell me $50. If you don't want to spend $50, tell me $25 and I'll spend $25. Tell me what you want to spend. I don't care what it is,
Right. One of the things you said that I really loved was having Marilyn available at those meetings helped, like, with that creative process that might have been sparked by finding space or seeing an opportunity there. Having Marilyn available or having an architect available on site to help kind of realize that and sort of figure out, okay, yeah, let's put our heads together and see what we can do here. That in addition to money, having the team member available to kind of vet that idea, I think is really critical too.
Yes, and I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that had I decided to save that money and tell Marilyn, we don't need you to project manage the construction, that would have been more costly.
Yes.
We would have ended up spending more money.
We're going to highlight that and put that in quotation marks and
In
put it on all of our websites. Like, that's the name of this episode. Exactly. Right there.
No, I remember specific problems we ran into that I would have made the wrong decision and it would have cost more money.
and more fights probably.
Right.
Yes. Right.
Well, there you go. Sometimes it's nice to have a neutral third party.
Yeah, as y'all if you probably didn't know that already, we all have like these minors in marriage counseling. That's what we do on the side.
The other advantage is, since we're on this theme, that I want to highlight is Marilyn's note-taking capabilities.
Oh my God, I'm amazing.
And so
Yes, my notes.
I learned so much from my job from Marilyn.
But her taking notes means that when the builder said, "Oh, you said this," no, you didn't, and it's all there. And
She had receipts.
Receipts.
keep receipts. That'll be advice number 2.
I'm glad you guys brought up my minutes. It's not the first time that someone has highlighted my minutes as one of the things that is important. But whether that's me taking them or someone on the project, someone's got to take record of what's being said. Construction is the Wild West sometimes. And even with everyone with the best intentions, everyone's got a lot going on and there's a lot of confusion happening. So just having like a clear, neutral set of notes is really, really helpful. And yeah, we're here to help make things easier and to save money. Like that's what we're here to do. That's like kind of what we get excited by. So
Right.
There's no process that's perfect and there's hiccups all the time. But what's something when you walk into this house, you're like, I love this. This is the best part about this renovation. And I recognize it every time I come home.
You want to go first?
When I saw this question earlier, I thought the dining room, because that's like our convening space, when we have friends over. But then I was like, maybe the kitchen, but that's Alex's thing.
So lots of
And
things.
like thinking about it again, I love our half bathroom. Like I said at the beginning, that wallpaper I had in mind like before we even like moved into the house. But I love like walking into it and just like like I feel the joy it brings every time I walk in. And it's like a funky room. It has like this cool lighting that Marilyn found, and like that was like her addition to the design of the bathroom, and it just feels like you're walking into like a hotel bathroom. And I love like restaurant bathrooms, hotel bathrooms that are like really cool design, and I feel like that every time I walk into my own bathroom. Not to mention that it's no longer part of the kitchen like it used to be, so that's like a huge added bonus.
That's a plus.
So, yeah.
Well, also, every time I post that bathroom on social media, everyone goes bananas. Everyone loves it. It's a crowd pleaser.
I mean,
on
it's
social media
like,
too.
a 3-year-old, like our 3-year-old and our baby won't appreciate it for a while, but when we have friends coming over or, new visitors, like everybody's always like, oh my God, like this bathroom is here. Where did it come from? So it's really nice. I love it.
Yeah, for me, if there's one room, it's the kitchen. I mean, I spent a lot of time figuring out that kitchen and what I wanted there.
Do you remember our spreadsheet, Alex, of like every tool?
Absolutely.
And like, yeah.
So yeah, we made sure that there was room for everything. And even then it's never enough. But the kitchen's probably the one room where every morning I go in there, everything's where I wanted to be. There's plenty of counter space, plenty of lighting. But thinking about this, there's times where just walking through the house, I'm not in any room particular, and I'm just happy that the house has a clean, crisp look. Like, we've lived in apartments, many different apartments. There's always like the outlets that look dingy or the old style light switches and things don't quite work. And for me, what's most important is the fact that I'm confident because we did all the electrical, because all the plumbing is new, the infrastructure is all fresh. The chances of there being some disaster next week is very low. And I can look around and see that everything works the way I expect it to work. Little things like, I was really big on 3-way switches. That way you can light up because as you're going up the stairs, things are dark and all that. And all that's the way I wanted it to be. And that to me is really what gives me the most joy. Is just looking at the whole thing and saying, this is mine. And this is the way I wanted it to be. I mean, and there's also one more thing. The fact that every outlet is childproof.
Oh yeah, huge.
Because Cammie, our daughter, loves to touch those things. And I still don't let her, but I'm confident that she can't really hurt herself. So that's a big plus too.
That's a great note to end on, guys. It's really nice to, not only the childproof aspect, but, hearing about, of course, I love to hear all the spaces that you guys love, but, and it's because of the collaboration, you guys worked really, really hard as owners and as, deeply invested in the process, and that paid off in your home. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for having us. It's been our pleasure.
They were great, Marilyn.
Yeah, they were really wonderful to work with, and I really appreciate all the detail they brought to our conversation today.
Well, there were a bunch of takeaways, and I'm sure y'all will get into these too. But one of the things that we haven't talked about, I think, is the kind of growing with a family aspect of this renovation.
Yeah.
And thinking about they were 2, then they became 2+, and then they were 3, and now they're 3+, about to be 4. And how some of the design decisions they made were thinking about the future, and others they had no idea about, which is totally normal. And getting it perfect is really impossible. I think one of the things we talk about all the time, especially when we have homes that are like generational homes. So people have been in, who are in the like later stages of their forever home. They talk about at the beginning when they had little kids, they wanted like an open plan so they could see their kids all the time and make sure they weren't like licking electrical sockets. And then when the kids were teenagers, they wanted to put them all downstairs in the basement so they couldn't smell them or hear them all the time. And then when the teenagers left, they wanted to like close the doors to their rooms or turn them into gyms or whatever. So we do like evolve a lot in our homes, and being able to kind of anticipate some of that stuff is part of our job, because we've worked with multiple clients before. But I love how they talked about that process and thinking about what was coming next in that project, and you helped them with that.
I always joke that I'm the second person who hears that a couple's pregnant after their personal trainer. Like they tell their personal trainer or their gym buddies or whatever, and then they tell me, and then they tell their parents. Because they're like, and I can see it on their face. It's happened to me many times over the years. And they say, well, we're going to have to change some things. I'm like, are you pregnant? Yeah. How'd you know? So that happens a lot, and my clients are often in sort of two phases of life. I have a lot of folks like Alex and Ximena, who we just interviewed, who are getting their first real grown-up house, been living in apartments in the city and ready for a full home to start building a family. That's one kind of group. And then the other group is folks who are downsizing, or folks who are at a later point in their life and who want to rejigger their house to reflect that. So I think those kind of life transition moments are really important moments to work on your house and to do a renovation and to make it reflect the kind of life that you're living.
I thought it was interesting also when she said that there were some new cool features that have come along that she has seen since they finished their renovation. And I think everyone goes through that, because even while you're building or as you're finishing up, you're like, oh, I wish I had a place for the dog because I saw that on TikTok. But it will never be perfect in that situation. You'll never get all the cool things forever. You have to keep in your mind, kind of draw a line at some point and stop changing things and just accept that, okay, well, we may add something in 5 years or in 2 years or whatever your tolerance is for coming back to the project. But yeah, the cool things that we can put in today, there are going to be new cool things in 2 years.
Yeah, remember when we were putting iPod docks in everyone's houses?
Right.
Yeah.
Right,
exactly. And that lasted for about a year and a half.
Talk a little bit more about their discovery process during construction, like finding new things to like do. And I talked about this with them, but I want to hear your take on that too, because I think that does happen a lot in renovations. Like it's just it happens a lot less in new construction, but in renovations, which is what you and I do, it happens all the time.
Yes, it does happen all the time. And some of it is because of sort of scary things like, we opened this wall and there's some problem going on. But even when that has happened on this project or others, there's still a way to spin it, to turn it into a cool opportunity. I think that's one of the reasons why I love renovations on old homes, because it's just a constant source of creative, like calling on your creativity and your technical knowledge all the time. And I just love it. I love that. When I get the call from the contractor saying, hey, well, we found this, I like immediately get excited because I'm like, wow, we got to dig in. We got to find the solution. So yeah, I mean, they mentioned on this project, they mentioned the pocket doors. There were a couple other things where we moved a wall a little bit, or we adjusted where a light fixture was going to go. We had an idea at one point about we were struggling with where to put a plumbing waistline, because in renovation, of course, that's one of the most difficult things to place, especially in these old homes. And, in the Boston area, we're dealing with horsehair plaster and lath. We're dealing with, kind of some really old construction techniques a lot of times. And that means opening up walls can also be quite messy and, all that kind of stuff. But, they were really open to understanding when it was too late to do some things and when this was a serious opportunity to make a decision to make something even better than it was before. And I was obviously advising them the whole time, but their willingness to understand that and to be ready to jump on a new opportunity. I mean, Alex was very clear that that was because he saved room in his budget.
Right. I was just about to say that's not, those things don't happen for free. Like, you don't just get in there and say, oh, I want to add new pocket doors. Let's just incorporate this into what we're already doing. Like, there's cost associated with it. So having that kind of in your head as you start the project, I thought that tying those two things together is critical.
Yeah. And in a renovation, there's often a lot of things that you can't plan for. Like, for example, they wanted to repair a bunch of the shingles on the outside of the house. It's a shingled house and they're asbestos shingles. So we have to approach that in a certain way. You can't rip them all off. You can't, there's rules we have to follow and all this kind of stuff. So we were really nervous if they started to disintegrate in our hands when we went to paint the outside of the house, that was going to suddenly be an extra $50,000 to $80,000 of rabbit hole that we were going to fall down. So he set aside quite a contingency, and when it came to be that it was only going to be $5,000 or $6,000 of repair, it wasn't 5,000 or 6,000 surprise on top of stuff. It was, wow, this is only 5 or 6. I was planning for the worst, which was whatever, 50 to 80 or more or whatever. That made things go a lot smoother during meetings because they were not in a constant state of panic, just in the normal state of panic that everyone's in when they see their home completely demoed from the inside out.
I really appreciated his entire conversation about budget. I know he recommended that you share your budget and be very transparent. Like, this is where I want to be, and this is why, and this is what I want to get for it. And he said, without saying, if you're transparent and you put it out there, you can have a conversation about it. And Marilyn, you had the opportunity to push back and say, we may not get there, but maybe we'll I do this with clients sometimes. It's like, do you want me to design to this budget and we're not going to go over? Or are we going to design to what you want? And then we will investigate it with a contractor that will get us real numbers. And we reconvene from there, which is what he said. And the best part of it, two things. He said, it felt like we hit a speed bump and it makes you wonder, should I even be doing this? And he said, it took me, 3 days? It took me 3 days to figure it out. Marilyn and I got back together and we talked about it. I thought that was really important for our listeners to hear. Just because you hit a speed bump, it's not, you don't just throw everything away. You take a minute and get a different perspective, kind of like what we're doing here with this podcast. Like, we want you to have been in your house for a year because you have a very different perspective when you have that period to sit back and think of things.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that they mentioned that I really appreciated and wanted to underline is, if you don't specify something, then the GC will do whatever is easiest for them.
Right.
Not out of not trying to be sneaky or not trying to do something wrong, but they're going to take the easiest path. And this is why in our drawings, when we offer full services, which is primarily what we do, our drawings have the towel bars chosen. We have worked with our clients to choose the handles on the cabinets, and we have placed them in the drawing. Our schedules are pages and pages long. We have picked absolutely everything, the grout color, the orientation of the tile. We draw everything. And that's because if you don't, they're going to just do something, or they're going to ask the owner during construction. And the owner is already dealing with all the other surprises or the stress or just living their life, expecting a baby, trying to hold down their jobs, living in a rented place, all that kind of stuff. And then the builder's coming to them every 5 minutes saying, what color grout do you want here? What color grout do you want there? What color grout do you want there? No, we like to choose everything. This is why I believe in full services. It costs more for the architect, but Alex said it saves you in the end.
Yeah, he did say it.
You're making decisions outside the heat of battle. You're making decisions in a calm state. And those decisions, when things get a little crazy during construction, and you're stressed and they've torn apart your whole house and they're asking you questions, you always say the magic words. Let's go take a look at the drawings. Let's see what we've got over here. And let's see what we decided when we had our heads about us instead of right now where everything's crazy. Because if you don't tell them, if you don't tell the GC, they're going to do what's easiest, not necessarily what you want. So we got to tell them. That's our job.
This one had so many good tips, I think. But one of the things he talked about was having a contractor on early in the process to provide feedback during that pricing. We do our best to keep up with current pricing, but we don't talk to manufacturers and get pricing from subs on a day-to-day basis. That's what builders do. That's what contractors do. So while we have communications and we can take information from recent projects and sort of provide ballpark, having like real live information from people who are pricing labor and subs and materials all the time is really what brings a budget into kind of its full scope. Like that's when you begin to sort of see what something's really going to cost. And until you get to that point, there's always kind of a little bit of a dim light on a project. So the earlier you bring somebody into that project to provide that real time, accurate construction cost pricing, and we update ours, we get some ballparks at the beginning. As we develop drawings, we get feedback about what people are seeing delays on or what they're seeing, pricing increases on, whether it's cedar shingles or whatever that is. And so we can sort of help work that budget through the design process too. But you can't really do that unless you have that contractor, that builder on board early in the project.
Amen. And I want to add to that in a renovation, it's even more important because a renovation is not, you cannot price a renovation using square foot numbers. None of them are like each other. You need experienced contractors and architects who are experienced in renovation. It's a totally different world. And so when we're looking at it saying, is this a more costly way to proceed with this item, or is this a more we can't even shop online and compare prices. That's not even what you're doing. What you're doing is standing there with the contractor going, okay, if we vault this ceiling, we're going to have to take this bearing wall out. If we take this bearing wall out, are we going to do columns over here? We got to do footers in the basement. Oh, that's no problem. We got basement access. Oh, on project B over here, we don't have basement access and we're going to have to hand cart the concrete in to do a lolly column footing. Okay, well now that one is now 6 times as expensive to do the exact same thing as this one over here because of the unique aspects of renovation. And I think people, they want to know, well, what does a project cost? Why is it so hard for you to answer that? And I'm like, because in a renovation, especially the older the home, actually, I was going to say the older the home, the more likely it is to be more crazy, but that's not true. No. Sometimes it's those homes from the 70s and 80s that are the worst. Because I can count. I can count on 1920s framing. Yeah. I can count on 1880s framing. I've seen it 100 million times. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh, yeah. There's water in every 80s wall.
That's right. And so there's a sort of an additional thing there about pricing, that it's a collaborative exercise. It's part of the design process. It's not just like I'm going to the grocery store, pulling things off the shelf, and then that's just what it costs. It doesn't work that way. Can I talk about one more thing that Alex brought up that I just want to underline that's super boring but super important? Project meeting minutes.
Yes, that was a great nugget. Yes.
I feel like it's so overlooked as being important. I mean, we do them manually at this point, and they're just a part of how we do business. I have hundreds of thousands of pages of meeting minutes from the last 20 years. And I learned where I learned how to do that? When I was a contractor. I was trained from day one, whoever takes the minutes keeps the story of the project. So that role, and a lot of times my architect friends who work for bigger firms and work on bigger projects, they're like, you take the minutes at the OAC meetings? Yes, I do. Isn't that the contractor's responsibility? You got a residential contractor who's taking detailed minutes? I will.
Yep, bring it.
I would be delighted. It's not part of the culture. So anyway, meeting minutes, everyone's like, oh boy, here's Marilyn with her 10 pages of minutes. But boy, oh boy, is everyone really happy I have them.
Now you're giving me anxiety because my OAC notes from my meeting yesterday are on my to-do list for this morning. I'm like,
get them
oh,
done.
I gotta get to those. Thanks for joining us on Home the Second Story. If you'd like to come on the show and share your story, email us at admin@htssspodcast.com. We'd love to have you as a guest. For more inspiring homeowner stories and tips, we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Home, the Second Story podcast. Feel free to share this episode with a friend. Contact information for all three of our architects are in our show notes. And don't miss future episodes. Follow or subscribe to our show for free in Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now.